Let's keep going. So we talk about the language function. Language function you only find in left hemisphere. And let's look at two brain area, Broca and Wernicke area. Both of them are the German neurosurgeon. So the 20th century is when the German was a pretty advanced country. So let's look at the Broca and the Wernicke. The Broca, that's the Broca area. And they have different function of the language. Broca is a language initiation. So how do we find them? We find the patient have a stroke and they damage this area. When the patient damage the Broca area, after stroke, they survive, they recover, and you can talk to them. And they totally understand what you are talking about. But when they try to talk back, and they found they can't, they will work very hard to only create one word or two. And the reason is they damage the Broca area. So if you damage the Broca area, it affects your language, speech function. You could not talk, but you can understand. Let's look at the Wernicke area. Wernicke area is language understanding. When the patient damage the Wernicke area, they have no problem talking to you. They can sit there and talk to you for hours. But if you pay attention to what they said, you found what they said doesn't make any sense. It's like they just grab words and put the words together. So that's the Wernicke area. That's for the language understanding. And it turned out both of them only exist in the left brain. So in the right brain, they don't have Broca, they don't have Wernicke area. The right brain is used to analyze the information, the emotion part of the music. So like you listen to music, you feel so emotional, you cry, and that's the right brain's function. So the language function is the left brain. Okay, now let's go to the forebrain. The forebrains, we're gonna pick two functions to talk about. Humans have a huge frontal cortex. So the frontal lobe, one is the motor cortex, primary motor cortex. So we talk about this. This is the precentral gyrus. That's where your motor cortex is located. And you have a whole body map. It controls different muscles. So if this area is damaged, you won't be able to control the muscle. That's where the motor control starts. And another function of the forebrain, let's look at the prefrontal cortex, this brain area. Its function is organizing, planning for the future. And to talk about the prefrontal cortex, we have to talk about this person. His name is Gage. And he lived in the 19th century. He worked for the railroad company. And he used to be a very responsible worker. He always go to check the explosive. And one day, due to the accident, they triggered the explosive. They did not know he was there checking the explosive. And a big metal staff moved in. You have the cheekbone, right? This is zygomatic bone. And this is the zygomatic process. So the big metal staff moved in from the zygomatic process and moved out from the frontal bone. It completely knocked out its prefrontal cortex. And that's the metal staff, and that's his skull. And after the accident, everybody was terrified because he has a hole in his head, and he's still standing there. And they find some clothes, cover his hole, and ask him go to find the doctor. So he jumped on the horse. He went to the town. And the doctor found, oh, you have a hole. So the doctor just stopped the bleeding and asked him, okay, go home, sleep. And he went home, he slept for about 3 weeks, and amazingly, he recovered. And after he came back, well, everyone was happy because he was such a good worker, and he looked like nothing happened. He has no language function impairment because now we know the language function is not there. He has no motor function impairment because motor function is in the motor cortex. It's not in the prefrontal cortex. He can talk to other people, and when you feel hungry, he will eat. When you feel thirsty, he will drink. Look like we don't need prefrontal cortex at all. It turned out gradually people gonna complain. They say he's not a Gage we knew anymore. He used to be a very responsible worker, but after the accident, they could not trust him for anything. And it's like 1 year in, the other year out. And after the accident, eventually they have to fire him. They have to fire him because they could not trust him for anything. And the last job he found is he work in the circus. He just take a metal step, show people his hoe. That's what he did for the rest of his life. So turn out, what's the function of prefrontal cortex? It look like we don't need it, but it makes us human. That's the most important function in human. You plan for the future, you think, is it worth it? And that's the prefrontal cortex function. Another story about the prefrontal cortex in the 20th century. Still, they try to help the patient. They will do the surgery, lobotomy. And it helped the patient. Usually, they treat the patient with serious anger management problem. And the surgery is they put the knife through the orbit, and they carefully avoid the eye, and they will cut the prefrontal cortex. So the prefrontal cortex will shrink. And because this surgery, you found it is not required to open the skull. So it turned out this surgery can be done in the clinics. It takes about 2 hours, and the patient can go home in the same day. So this became a very popular surgery in the early 20th century. And even John Kennedy's little daughter received this surgery to treat her anger management problem. So this surgery becomes so popular, and the doctor who invented this surgery actually received Nobel Prize. So there are 3 controversial Nobel Prize winners in the history. One of them is the doctor who invented this surgery, lobotomy. And it took people a while to realize, okay, well, they damaged the prefrontal cortex. You have the serious side effect, including the emotion. You have very little emotion, and you could not plan for the future. So that's the prefrontal cortex, high-level reasoning function. Okay, now let's go to the limbic system. Limbic system is more than one brain area. The most important 2, hippocampus, associated with memory. Amygdala. Amygdala is emotion and emotion-related memory. These 2 areas, so their function is your emotion and emotion-related memory. That's the limbic system. When we talk about learning and memory in Unit 3, Unit 4, we'll talk about hippocampus. And in the last chapter, when we talk about emotion, we'll talk about this as well. Amygdala is like your panic button. So when this becomes super activated, and that's when you have panic attack. So they will try to inhibit their function. That's your alarm system in your brain. So limbic system associated with emotion and memory. And your hypothalamus is also part of it. So this is your dicephalon. They call it dicephalon, including your thalamus, your epithalamus. Epithalamus is the area release melatonin. Not melanin. Melanin is pigments in your skin. Melatonin, that's the hormone associated with your sleep-awake cycle. So that's the epithalamus. Pineal gland, that's one. That's the thalamus. Thalamus is like a train station. So all the information from your body need to go to the cortex, will go through the thalamus, go to the cortex. If you want to control your body, from the cortex through the thalamus, it's going to go out. And now let's look at this. This small triangle is called the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus, it controls all your endocrine function because it will talk to the pituitary gland, that's your endocrine king. It also controls your hunger, your thirst, your sexual desire, your body temperature. That's hypothalamus. So it also regulates emotion and motivated behavior. So that's this area. And amygdala, we talk about amygdala. That's your emotion. And they use monkey to do experiment. Monkey are naturally afraid of snake. So if you throw a snake into their cage, they will jump, they will scream. And they will take the monkey out, they lesion amygdala. And after the surgery, you throw a snake into the cage, you found the monkey gonna jump down and grab the snake and gonna play like a rope. So they lose their natural fear. This is how they identify the function of amygdala. So that's the area associated with emotion. And not just emotion, emotion-related memory. Why we need to have fear emotion? Because you want to increase your chance to survive. You touch something, you've been burned, you remember, don't touch it again. And that's the function of emotion, negative emotion, and it's amygdala. But once this becomes super activated, it can affect your daily life. and that's when people have panic attack or anxiety, and that's when this brain area becomes too activated. We'll talk more about it in Unit 5. And hippocampus. So hippocampus, that's the area with memory, not where your memory is stored. It's more like a processing center. So your memory, you have the short-term memory, you need to turn into the long-term memory, and the process area is hippocampus. So in this class, well, you know it, right? The pretty famous patient called HM. He surgically removed hippocampus. So it turned out he could not form any new memory after the surgery. Okay, now let's go to the original brain area. Original brain area, the brainstem, including 3 parts: the midbrain, the pons protruding out, so it's easy to identify the pons, and medulla oblongata. So these 3 brain area, some textbook called the Leader's brain. So even Leader has it. It's control very original brain function, like your heart rate, your breathing. That's all this area. Your pupil reflex. So if you like the TV shows show you the emergency room, you found the doctor gonna shine the light to the pupil, check their pupil reflex because they are checking this area. And in the cardiovascular system, you have the cardiovascular control center, your RCC, your respiratory control center. They're all in here. So the respiratory control center is in the pons and medulla oblongata. So we do have people, when they go to sleep, they forget to breathe, and they have to check the problem come from the pons or medulla oblongata. So these are the brainstem. So let's quickly go through the brainstem. So the midbrain is communication part. So between the high-level brain area and the medulla oblongata, that's the midbrain. And you also have some nerves called the cranial nerve. These are the cranial nerves. These are the nerves extending out from your head. You have 12 pairs of cranial nerves. And the hindbrain, the medulla oblongata, and the pons, it controls your important physiological function. Your heart rate, your breathing, is all in here. So if you damage this brain area, probably won't be able to make it. And that's why in the emergency room, they're gonna shine the light to the pupil and check the pupil constriction, because that's the brainstem's function. The last one, the cerebellum. The cerebellum is here. So that's the area with your body balance. It's part of the motor, but that's not where the motor is initiated. The motor function is initiated in the motor cortex. The hindbrain is part of it got involved in calculating, so it regulates a lot of fine muscle tune. And when you need to balance your body, you need a lot of muscle, when to contract this, when to relax that. It requires the cerebellum. And this is areas in athletes, especially gymnastics. They can flip on those 4-inch wide balance bar. That's crazy, like Simone Biles. That's very good. And they must have very good cerebellum for balancing. And this is the area can easily be affected by alcohol. So when you drink alcohol, alcohol can go through the cerebellum, and when it's been affected, people can walk because the signal comes from the motor cortex, initiation part from the motor cortex. But they could not walk pretty balanced, and the reason is cerebellum being compromised. Okay, now we keep going down. We go to the spinal cord. Spinal cord, you also have a lot of neurons there. You don't use your spinal cord to think. It's reflex. Like you touch something hard, you move your hand back. That's mainly the spinal cord's function. So its function is to increase your chance to survive. And when this happens, this video, if you are interested, you can take a look. This guy, he used a cell phone when he was ironing his clothes, and he grabbed the wrong one, right? So he quickly throw the iron away. That's when we appreciate the spinal cord's function. So it's not designed to think, it's to quickly move your hand back to decrease the damage. And when you do your annual health check, they won't ask you to touch something hard, but they will do this. So they will hit your knee and you will kick. That's how they check this reflex is still functioning. Okay, let's take a break.